OIE, I'm sure most of you are familiar with. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ISO and the work that they're doing on animal welfare standards, but I'll go into a little bit of what OIE is doing just to catch you up on where they're at, and then the majority of my presentation will be on the ISO process, because it is quite a detailed process. So the development of animal welfare standards is not new. We currently have three types of standards around the globe. We have the government standards, like we have in the EU. We have industry standards, like we have here in the US. And then we also have private standards and certifications that companies offer, you know, that come with those logos that you see on products. So, for example, Validus and American. So let's just focus quickly on OIE first. Animal welfare was first identified as a priority in the OIE strategic plan from 2001 to 2005. OIE member countries mandated that the organization take the lead internationally on animal welfare. And as the international reference organization for the WTO for animal health, they wanted to have recommendations and guidelines covering animal welfare practices and reaffirming that animal health is a key component to animal welfare. So the standards are developed through an ad hoc expert group, and they're convened to draft text. So the texts are normally reviewed by the OIE Animal Welfare Working Group, which provides recommendations then to the Terrestrial Animal Health Standards Commission, which is also known as the Code Commission. Following review by the Code Commission, these draft texts are sent to OIE members for comment. For the U.S., so this would go to USDA, and USDA would circulate a draft to all the interested parties, and you could provide feedback directly to the USDA, or for our organization, we also work through the Animal Ag Alliance to try and get a consensus on key comments to make sure that we're not overwhelming USDA. It makes it a little bit easier when we can come to consensus on some of these comments that we provided these draft texts. So the texts go through 2 rounds of comment, and then they're usually proposed for adoption into the terrestrial code. So the process has resulted in the completion of the standards that you see on the screen. And one of the issues the OIE has is getting implementation of these standards by member countries. And this is a key point for why work is being done at ISO, as from the purview of OIE. Some of the standards that are in development, one is dairy. The first draft came out last summer, I think. It went back to the expert group. They have completed their work, and we should see a second draft here in the spring. So if you're interested in that, keep your ears open. And then the next livestock animal welfare standards that are going to be drafted are pork and then laying hens. They're saving the best for last, I think. So that was a quick update on OIE. The other organization that is working on animal welfare standards is ISO. ISO is the world's largest developer of voluntary international standards. ISO is a network of national standards bodies. And then these national standards bodies make up the ISO membership, and they also represent ISO within their country. Most ISO standards focus on process and product specifications for things such as computers, healthcare, and they also deal in agriculture. So the values of ISO are described as being transparency, openness, consensus, one country equals one voice, and an organization that addresses the concerns of developing countries. So it's composed of, again, a network of these national institutes, standards institutes in 164 countries, with a central secretariat in Geneva. The American National Standards Institute, ANSI, represents the United States at ISO, and the American Oil Chemists Society is a member of ANSI here in the U.S., and through ANSI facilitates many of the working groups, such as the Working Group 16, which is on animal welfare. So this is where it gets nice and complicated, and it's a little bit difficult to work through the process, but they have a structure, and We've been assured it works in every other topic that they've ever had to do, but animal welfare, I think, is a different beast for them, and they've learned that it's not quite as smooth when you have an issue that is so emotionally charged across many different stakeholders. So ISO committee structure is broken down into technical committees, which are known as TCs. So TC34 is the Technical Committee on Food Products, from which the working group on food animal welfare resides. In order to participate in the working group, 16 experts from the United States formed a technical advisory group, or a TAG, that has to work through AOCS, that Chemist Society group, because they're our designated administrator for and liaison organization. So anything that the U.S. TAG, so our group of interested stakeholders here in the U.S., anything that we want to move forward has to go to AOCS, which goes to ANSI, which goes to ISO. And that is the funnel through which everything goes. You following me? lots of acronyms and all sorts of fun stuff. Okay, and to throw into the mix, so why are we working on animal welfare? So ISO and OIE established a moratorium of understanding in 2011 to strengthen cooperation in all the fields of mutual interest, including animal welfare. So there was an organization, Safe Supply of Affordable Food Everywhere, or SSAFE, approached ISO to develop a relationship with OIE to work on animal welfare. And many of the SSAFE member companies you're familiar with. Oops, did I skip one? Oh, it's not showing up. All my logos aren't showing up. Anyway, you've got Cargill, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Zoetis, Dannon, Keystone Foods, Nestle, Purina. They are all part of SSAFE. So sorry that my logos didn't show up. SSAFE is a public-private partnership, again, incorporated in 2006 to integrate food safety, animal health, and plant health across the food supply chain to improve public health and well-being. So the idea that SSAFE had was for the food chain implementation of the OIE animal welfare standards, those first lists that you'd seen, which included transportation, slaughter, shipping, transport, for possible government implementation of OIE animal welfare standards in regards to trade and to promote international harmonization on animal welfare standards. So they want something that they can point to and say, this is what we follow across the globe. And so their vision, I think, is not to be prescriptive, because it wouldn't work across the board, including in developing countries. So it's going to have to be kind of a generic umbrella under which all those three types of animal welfare guidelines and standards kind of fit under. So the EU regulation, the industry standards, and the private standards, they're all going to have to be able to kind of fit under that umbrella. So a little background as to what's happened and why we're kind of back at the beginning. So in August of 2012, so TC34, so that's the technical committee on the food side for ISO, deemed that Working Group 16 would be convened, and they had a call to participate that went out to all the countries. So, and experts were pulled from each of those countries to create the tag. So we have a U.S. tag. And again, the U.S. tag is what we call pay-to-play. So this is a private standard group. So you have to pay to be a member of the U.S. tag. And so we've been doing this for the last 2 years. So the first order was a vote on whether or not the work on animal welfare and food-producing animals would move forward. A lot of the livestock groups who were part of the tag were against this work because it was not very clear what their intent was and what the final product would be. So we voted that no, it should not move forward. So the U.S. Voted that way, but the majority of the countries voted for the work to proceed. So Dr. Francois Gary from SSAFE was appointed as the convener of Working Group 16, so he's running the show as far as the working group is concerned. And the first meeting was in October of 2012. There have been 3 meetings. So you had the October 2012 in Paris, you had the February meeting in Paris, and you've had a WebEx meeting that was in June of last year. We've had many, many conference calls with the U.S. TAG. And in July of 2013, a new work item proposal was sent back to TC34 for a vote, again, on whether to continue work. So this was the second vote on whether or not we were going to move forward, or if we were going to stop. And the vote concluded in December of 2013, and that vote was to continue to work to create a standard on animal welfare. Again, this is, it feels like Groundhog Day sometimes in this, but...
That's another question.
Uh-huh.
So the U.S. started the effort and then voted no.
No, we didn't start the effort. SSAFE started the effort. So the multinational companies were the ones that went to ISO to say, we need this standard. So when the call went out for experts, and again, it's pay to play, so it's a wide variety of stakeholders. We have Mercy for Animals, HSUS, Humane Society International, all the way up to, you know, all of our livestock groups and some animal health companies and others. And we have 78 people on our tag. And usually a tag for an ISO standard maybe has 4 or 5 people on it because it's usually really specific and it's very technical. And this is one of those issues, again, that's very emotional, and it's been very difficult to work with in that framework of 78 people with widely differing feelings. Yeah.
For an ISO to start an initiative of a new standard, it's minimum of 5 countries. Obviously, you identify some core organizations within the U.S.
Yeah.
Who are the other 5 countries?
I'll get to that. Yeah. So we had 9 countries that participated in this first meeting. So, and this was a little bit different again. How this project came about, it did not go through the regular ISO process. It kind of was backwards. They ended up at a meeting in, I think, Kenya. They brought this up, and it was kind of voted on there that, yeah, they should. They should do it just based on whoever was at that meeting. And so work started going forward pretty quickly, but it was not through the ISO process, the normal ISO process. So it was a little bit messed up from the beginning, which I think really got everybody confused, and that's why at the meeting in October, so there were 9 countries. So you had Denmark, Egypt, France, India, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK, and the United States. And then you had the 3 liaison groups, the OIE, the International Dairy Federation, and SSAFE. So those were the first ones. And this meeting, for the U.S., it was bad timing. It was the same time as USAHA. So, and they gave us like 4 weeks notice. By the way, there's going to be a meeting in Paris in 4 weeks. So come all, you know. So we couldn't send a lot of folks because they were at USAHA. So it was a mess from the beginning. So during the meeting, a drafting group was formed. So about 5 or 6 folks were put on to work on animal welfare and food producing animals documents. So the drafting committee included reps from IDF, so Dairy Federation, Humane Society of the United States, USDA, AMS, and the Royal Society for Prevention to the Cruelty of Animals, and SSAFE. So that was the drafting group for the first document. The most important thing was what happened afterwards, because the drafting group created a document that basically took the OIE animal welfare guidelines for beef, and they kind of stuck in words here and there to make it apply to all animals. And that did not work very well. It turned into a 16-page document that was, everybody about had a heart attack, because all of a sudden it goes out to the groups and we're like, where did this come from? You know, this is not what we thought was going to happen. And so we pushed back. And so there was another meeting in February. So this time you had 9 countries, and this time it was Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, UK, and the US. And then you had 7 liaison organizations. So you had OIE, you had the FAO, you had, again, the Dairy Federation, SSAFE, WISPA, which is World Society for Protection of Animals, the International Meat Secretariat, and you had the International Egg Commission. So now this draft that had gone out got the attention of lots of folks. It was a 2-day meeting. It was very interesting. The first day was arguing over this draft, and by the end of the day, we threw it out. We're like, we can't work with this. We got to start from scratch. So that was pushed forward by Denmark because they were calling for more transparency, and they said that the working group has to have a clear objective and scope. So that's basically what we worked on for the whole second day, was coming up with an objective and scope. So at the end of the meeting, we were ensured that ISO could not overreach OIE. That was another thing. So that was within the scope. They couldn't overreach OIE, so they can't make their own animal welfare standards. They have to use what OIE has. And the drafting group was again formed to create not a document, but an outline on how the future documents were going to be structured. So now we've gone from having a document, throwing it away, starting on an outline in February. So we get to the June meeting, which was via WebEx. It was a 5-hour WebEx, starting at 6 a.m. my time. So it was quite a way to start my day. So the U.S. TAG worked with a lot of comments on the outline prior to this meeting. And the objective was for the countries to have final comments and vote on whether or not the outline would go back to TC34 as a new work item proposal. So within ISO, the technical committee has to vote on a new work item proposal. Now this was what they should have done the first time, but we somehow got the cart ahead of the horse, and we ended up with a draft before the TC34 had actually voted on a new work item proposal. So now we have this outline. We're on this WebEx, and Denmark again led an effort to throw out the outline, and so we threw out the outline. So we keep going. I wouldn't even say 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We just keep going backwards. So again, all the countries are given an opportunity whether to vote. Are we going to do anything at all on this, or do we just stop? Because obviously we're having issues. It's really hard to agree. Everybody has a different vision of what's going to be happening here. So we all talked about it. And, we said, okay, no, we're going to vote no again, that the work shouldn't continue. There's no consensus on how to move forward. It's just going to be really impossible to have anything substantive come out of this group. So again, we were outvoted. And then in July, a more simple version of a new work item proposal was put together. And that was sent to TC34 for a vote in the end of July. Now at this point, we realized SSAFE was going to move forward with something regardless. So the U.S. decided as a strategic move was to vote yes, so that we could be part of the drafting group going forward because it was not going to die. So we'd have voted no, and then we voted no again, and we couldn't kill it. And to be in a good position to move forward, we voted yes. So that gets us to the end of last year. So now we have a new work item proposal from TC34 that, yes, we're moving forward. So we just got notification that there's a meeting on May 23rd of the working group. We're going to have an agenda. They recently sent out an impact study questionnaire. So that was sent to all the participating countries in the working group. And the intent is to define the expectations and the concerns of the countries that they have about this work. So everything that we've been talking about the last year and a half, they want it in a survey form. So we're going to discuss the results of that impact study. And because some of the countries that were on the initial drafting group voted no to the new work item proposal, and new countries have indicated an interest, they're going to reshuffle the drafting group. So we're going to talk about that when we're there. And then we're also going to talk about a timeline. The initial timeline for this, when they first put it out in August, they wanted it done in a year. And they wanted it on every production system, even though OIE had not yet drafted all of, and at that point they didn't even have beef done, I don't think. So, it was obvious they didn't understand where OIE was, but they wanted something. Again, they wanted to be able to point and say, this is what we follow. We follow this ISO standard, and it's going to help implement the OIE standards. So, just a little background. I kind of told you about the U.S. tag. It is very unwieldy. It's about 78 people. Again, it's a mixed group with HSUS, Mercy for Animals, ASPCA. We do have a really good facilitator. His name's Craig Morris. He's with USDA AMS, and he has done a really good job of working with both SSAFE, with ISO, and he's a really good communicator, and he has the patience of a saint, because it is a difficult job, but he does a very good job at it. So last slide. So wrap up. So we have over a year work. There hasn't been anything that's come out of this yet. We are working against a European and an extremist agenda within the group. We have been successful, again, in pushing back against those documents and outlines that were just unacceptable starting places. And we're hoping to, since we have voted yes, to hopefully get on the drafting group and have somebody on there that can influence that process at that smaller level, and then, again, keep participating within the meetings and providing comment and making sure that whatever comes out of this conforms, again, to OIE standards and doesn't go beyond that, and that it has no impact on international trade. I mean, those are our key goals. So I think the timeline is they're saying is by the end of 2015. We'll see how that goes.